Good morning, guys. What's up? What's up? It's good to see you all here. Welcome. I know we have some new faces in the crowd. I'm really glad you're here. As Andrew mentioned, I'm Pastor JD, and it is a pleasure to be with you. We are in week 4 of a series that we are calling Break Trail. That is entirely different than Breaking Wind. Breaking Wind is something that you probably learn a lot about at home from your father, but Breaking Trail. You're like, absolutely. But break trail is a hiking term. Speaking of hiking, anybody here a hiking fan? Anybody love to hike? I love to hike. My wife and I it'll be in November. We'll have been married for 15 years. And we have done many national trip hikes, gone to national parks to go hiking. In fact, when we just started when we were just married, we decided we were going to go on a hike around the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon. Have you guys ever heard of the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon? It's a real place. It looks nothing like the real Grand Canyon, so don't get your hopes up if you ever go see it. But it doesn't look like it does out west. But there's a rim hike that you can hike the whole way around, and there's different vistas that you can see, miles and miles. It's really pretty. And so we decided to do this backpacking hike where you're like in the middle of the wilderness. You're not easily accessible to roads or anything like that. There's just maybe a couple of roads that you cross the whole time you're out there. And so it was like we did it for over a 4-day period. Over those 4 days, we maybe saw 4 or 5 total people the entire time. So it's like you don't see a lot of people. If you get into trouble, you're kind of on your own, whatever. But we were hiking along, and it was day 2 of the hike, and we're just talking and laughing and things like that. And stopped for a water break, and I'm standing there, and what I thought were some leaves and some sticks began to rattle at me from right beside my boot. It was a rattlesnake right there. It saw me, it rattled, and then it scooted off and coiled up on a rock. Susan, wasn't it deafening, that sound? It was awful, like the rattle sound, and it was a big guy. But what I thought was an inanimate object, actually, can you guys see him in there? Oh, yeah, he's there. Trust me, he's there. Was actually very much alive. Very much alive. So, in the last couple of weeks, we have been looking at this journey of how Jesus broke trail, how he broke a new trail for us. And we've been looking at what it looks like for us to come upon the Easter holiday. And so in week 1 of this series, we talked about how Jesus was betrayed by his friends. Like maybe if you've ever been stabbed in the back by your friends, you know how difficult that is, how painful that is. And then in week 2, we talked about how Jesus was beaten within an inch of his life. He was tortured, and he was mocked on his way to the cross. Last week, Mr. Tim Florian gave a message on Jesus hanging on the cross between the 2 criminals and what that experience must have been like for him. And today, though, I want to talk about the celebration as we get to Easter coming up next weekend, today being Palm Sunday, next Sunday being Easter. We're going to talk about what happens next. Now, even if you're here today and you know very, very little about the Bible, chances are pretty good that you know what Easter is. It's the day that Jesus did what? Came back from the dead, right? He came back from the dead. And it's what Easter is all about. And honestly, it's what our entire faith is built upon. This idea that Jesus was dead, but that he came back to life. That 3 days later, he rose back to life. But before we get to the celebration, I hope you come to our Easter services next weekend up at the main church. And it's going to be a great celebration. But before we get there, I want us to talk about that middle period from the time on Friday when Jesus breathed his last breath until he came back to life on Sunday morning. I don't want you to jump ahead to the celebration. I want you to imagine for a second that you are one of Jesus' followers, and your leader, the one who you thought was the Son of God, is dead. He's dead, and to make matters worse, you're wondering if you're going to be next because of following him, if people are out to get you as well, because your life is in serious danger. See, everything that you had put your hope in, everything that you had put your trust into in following Jesus now has come to a total and abrupt end. And it feels very, very hopeless. By a raise of hands, has anybody here ever been through a time in their life where they felt completely hopeless? Raise your hand if that's you. For those of you who have not raised your hand, I hope it never happens to you. But for those of you who have, you know what I'm talking about when I say that it feels like the bottom of your life has fallen out and you're in a free fall looking up and it feels like you have no control and it's the most terrible feeling. I don't think that there is a worse feeling than to feel hopeless. And if that's you today, then this message is really, really for you. Or if you're going through a really difficult, challenging time, and maybe you're not quite to the level of hopelessness, but you're going through something very difficult right now, this message is definitely for you. And for those of you who fear that one day in the future you might face something where you might feel hopeless, this message is for you as well. See, in our lowest moments, it feels sometimes like it's impossible that anything good could come out of our circumstances where it just seems like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. It just feels miserable, it feels terrible, and it is totally anxiety filled and miserable. But here's what I want to tell you. Jesus is in the business of breaking new trails. And on the way to the cross, Jesus broke a trail from hopelessness straight to a thing called hope, where you can have hope even in your darkest of times. Now, let me tell you the story. So it's Sunday morning, and on Sunday morning, Jesus was crucified on Saturday, or I'm sorry, on Friday. We call it Good Friday. We call it good because we know that good came out of it, but in the moment it was not good. It did not look good at all. On Saturday, no one could do anything. They couldn't go to the tomb or anything like that because it was considered the Sabbath in the Jewish culture, and so you weren't allowed to leave your house, cook, do any sort of labor at all. So they weren't allowed to go. First thing on Sunday morning, three of the women who were very very close followers of Jesus, they go to his tomb and they go there with anticipation that he's going to be dead because they watched him breathe his last breath. They thought it was going to be a time where they were going to take some spices and they were going to open up the tomb and in order to honor his body, lay some spices over him and also just to keep the smell down from the decaying body. But this was going to be a sad and somber and very very hopeless situation. This is similar to when somebody that you know, or like somebody who's young dies young, and it's like, wait, they had so much life to live. There was so much potential. This is what it's not like. Your 98-year-old grandfather who lived a good long life, and now he passes away, and he was in pain. He wasn't good at the end of his life. This was like a total like what the heck is going on moment, and that's what they're experiencing. And so when you read from the book of Luke, chapter 24, verses 1 through 12, you see that the woman, they expect to see Jesus' body when they get there, when they're going to go and open up the tomb. But when they get there, the tomb is already opened. And they look inside, and there are two individuals, two angels sitting before them. And they're like, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, well, we're here to see Jesus. And they're like, oh, hey, he's not here. Like he's alive. And they're like, no, no, you don't understand. We've grown up in a Roman culture. We've literally seen hundreds of people die on crosses because that was the Romans' execution of choice. We know what it looks like when somebody is still slightly alive on a cross, and we know when somebody is fully dead. And believe me, Jesus was fully dead. And now you're telling me he's not? You're like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so they start to get that little flutter in their stomach, like, oh my goodness, could this really be true? Could this really be? Because they started to think back about all the cryptic things that Jesus said throughout his ministry, where he was making these subtle remarks about how he needed to die, but that he would come back. And all of a sudden, these things that made no sense to them before, all of a sudden it started to make sense. That Jesus was hinting toward this moment his entire time that he was on earth. And so they beeline it straight back to the other disciples, and they're like, guys, you're never gonna believe this. And they're like, yeah, you're right, we are never gonna believe this. Because who believes that somebody dies? They know he was dead, and then he comes back to life. They had trouble grasping it. There was a time back in 2010 where there was a terrible mining accident. It was in Chile, the country of Chile. There were 33 miners who went over 2,000 feet deep into the depths of the earth to do mining, just like they had done every single day. Only on this particular day, there was a shift in underground, and because of that shift, a rock the size of a building collapsed, and it fell through the only exit that these miners had. They had very minimal water, lacking clean oxygen, and The only light that they had was what was on their helmets, and as long as their batteries would last. Those men were in what I would consider a very, very hopeless situation. And it wasn't like they were in there for, a day or two. They were in that mine for nearly 70 days. 70 days. And during that time, a group of people on the surface began to devise a plan. There were engineers and scientists and other miners, and they devised a plan, and they came up with this idea of how do we innovate a plan to get these guys out. And so they innovated plans, and they failed and they succeeded. And after a whole lot of drilling, they developed this plan where they were going to drill 2,000 feet deep, and they were going to create this extraction tube, kind of like the one you see on the right side of the screen, to rescue these miners. It was like this super tight little elevator that was going to go down into the depths of the earth, and it was going to, one miner at a time, because that was all that would fit, take them back up to the surface. The trip took 15 minutes from the time it was in the base of the mine all the way to the surface. And no one knew if it was going to work, by the way. I mean, no one had ever tried this before. And so no one was confident it was going to work. No one was sure that the first person that was going to come out was going to be alive. And so it was time for the first miner to come up, and his name was Florenzio. Florenzio was the miner in the base of this cave, and family and friends and media outlets from all over the country, all over the world, were standing at the top where this extraction tube would come out, and all of a sudden, after a long, what seemed like an eternity, out comes Florenzio, alive and well. See, in this situation, Florenzio, he's the one who broke the trail. He was the one who made the path to see if it was the right way, and it was, in fact, the right way. And because of that, all the other 32 miners followed in his footsteps, and they all successfully made it out alive. Florenzio is the one who blazed the trail. He's the one who blazed a trail that led from certain death to life. All they had to do was follow his lead. Now, it's far from a perfect analogy, but in the same way, Jesus, his resurrection is similar to what Florenzio did on that first trip to the surface. See, when Jesus rose from the dead, he's the one who developed a way for us to go from certain death to life. In fact, the Apostle Paul, he writes it like this. He says, "For just as death came by means of a man, that man being Adam, whenever Adam sinned first, whenever he was on earth, in the same way, the rising from the rising from death comes by means of a man, that man being Jesus. For just as all people die because of their union with Adam, in the same way, all will be raised to life because of their union with Christ. But each one will be raised in proper order. First Christ, just like Florenzio, first Christ, first of all, and then those who belong to him." Now, whenever Paul is writing this, there's 2 points that I want to kind of make about this passage. The first thing that is really important that you recognize is that if you are a follower of Jesus, I can guarantee, unless Jesus comes back during your lifetime, I can guarantee that you are going to die. It is a certainty that you will die. But if you're a follower of Jesus, according to this passage, you are not going to stay dead. You are going to have the opportunity to live eternity in perfection with Jesus. One of the primary reasons, other than just loving Jesus, is because we get an opportunity to spend eternity with him forever and ever and ever. And that's the first part of this thing I want you to recognize. The second part that is important to realize is that Jesus, yeah, he made a way for us to have eternity, but he also made a way for you to have new life right now. In other words, you don't have to wait until eternity to experience that. You see, at the core of our faith is a belief that God can turn death into life, that God can redeem anything into something, that God can resurrect your situation and bring life out of it in a way that you never could have imagined. You see, with Jesus, there truly is no such thing as helplessness. Now, there were a lot of you that rose your hand whenever I said how many of you ever felt a hopeless feeling. And that's a tough place to be. And some of you are experiencing hopelessness at some level right now. Some of you are just going through a really rough patch in a season of your life where it just everything just seems to be going haywire. Everything seems to be going wrong. But no matter when it has been or what it is, I wonder for you what your situation was or is. And for some of you, the hopeless feeling that you're experiencing is because of your faith. You've had a faith in the past, but you feel like your faith is just that. It was in the past somewhere, and it was possibly maybe something back then, but today it doesn't seem real, so you're not even sure that it was real back then. And you are losing hope because you lack faith that God is really with you. And for some of you that are in this room, you don't have Jesus in your heart at all. And the hopelessness that you're feeling is because there's this void inside of you that needs to be filled, and you don't know. You keep trying to fill it with this, that, and the other thing, hoping that it will bring you something, and it doesn't. And it's because you're missing a faith in Christ. For some of you, it's a dream. You have a dream in your heart and your mind, and you feel right now like your dreams are just falling apart. It's like every single thing you try and do, it feels like every step you take forward, it's like you have to take 2 or 3 steps back. And it's not fair. And sometimes you just want to throw in the towel on your dreams. And there's somebody in this room that just wants to throw in the towel in general. You just want to give up on life. You just want it to end. And I hope that this message gives you some hope as a result of what I'm saying from God's word. For some of you, the reason why you're lacking hope right now is because of the world around you. You see how broken the world is around you, and you hate it, and you don't want it to be that way. But it seems like every time you try and make it better, it only gets worse. And it's getting really frustrating, and it's causing you to lose hope. And for the vast majority of you, the reason why you're feeling hopeless, or the reason why you're going through this rough patch is because of a relationship. It's because there is someone in your life that you desperately have been praying that God would do something miraculous in their life, but it seems like they just keep taking steps backwards, and that there's no way that they're going to get out of this. There's no way it's going to improve. There's somebody in your life who you just ask God, can you please just ask him to be more reliable for me? Could you please ask God, could you please not let them be a liar? And they just keep lying to you over and over and over again. They keep letting you down over and over and over again. And all you want is for it to improve, and it's not improving. And you feel hopeless. You feel hopeless in your situation. Listen, I know that it is not easy to hold on to your faith when it's dark. But can I tell you something? We can live in victory because of what Jesus did for us and celebration of what he did for us. But can I tell you something? There was a time when Jesus' disciples, for 3 days, they had to live with the idea that Jesus was dead, because Jesus actually was dead. He actually was in the grave for 3 days. And so the disciples back then, they knew exactly what it feels like to be in a moment where you're like, what the heck is going on? Why can't life get any better? Why can't somebody come to my rescue? And Jesus is going, no, you don't understand. I am coming to your rescue. You just need to realize that you need to have a little bit of patience. You need to realize that I'm on my way, that I am going to come and I'm going to rescue you from this situation. But you need to have faith. You need to trust me in this situation, that I do not let things remain dead. The basis of our religion, the basis of our faith, is that God does not let dead things stay dead, but he resurrects them. That is for you. That is for your dreams. That is for your world. That is for your relationships. The reason why Jesus does this is because the end of the story was not when he died on the cross and breathed his last breath. Yes, he did do that, but he did a lot more than that. Because 3 days later, he came out of the grave and he resurrected. And he brought new life to himself, but he brought new life so that you could have new life. So as we sing this next song, as we come before Jesus right now, we're going to sing a song called Graves into Gardens. And it is the perfect song for what we're about to talk about, because we are going to celebrate the fact that if you have Jesus in your heart, that you do not have to fear the hopelessness that this world tries to throw at you. And after this song is over, I'm going to pray over you. I'm going to pray for you. And I'm going to ask every single one of you who has not accepted Jesus if you want to accept Jesus. And I'm going to ask every single one of you who's going through a hopeless situation that you would pray that God would give you the strength and the courage and just the vision for the future, that he is there for you right now, and that you need not feel hopeless. Because in a relationship with Jesus, there is no such thing as hopelessness. So come on up front and let's sing this song together.